We all know the lottery is a game of chance. That's part of what makes it so great. Anyone can win. No skills required.
Grandma,
You okay, boy?
we won the lottery.
There might just be a secret hiding in the rules of a weird lottery game if you're smart enough to spot it and have a few math skills to boot. This is the mind-blowing story of two people who beat the lottery. The year is 2011, and we're in the sleepy Massachusetts town of South Deerfield. In fact, let's go a little closer. We're in Jerry's place, a small local coffee shop. Not much is happening inside until a man in his early 70s walks in. Suddenly, things get interesting. The man hadn't come in for coffee. Instead, he wanted 150,000 lottery tickets.
I'm gonna get you first.
Even stranger, he wasn't hoping to buy the big jackpot Powerball or Mega Millions tickets. Instead, he was hoping to find tickets for an obscure game called Cash Windfall, a game which had been running for 7 years but had only paid out its top prize of $2 million on one occasion. But Jerry's place wasn't the only spot where this was happening. At exactly the same moment, just down the road in Sunderland, a woman in her late 60s had walked through the doors of a Billy's Beer and Wine. She was also looking to spend $307,000 on lottery tickets for the same obscure game. They would both be standing at the counter of their chosen store for hours while the lottery machine slowly issued a combined total of 300,000 tickets to the mysterious pair. But what were they doing? Why spend so much money on a lottery game with a maximum prize of only $2 million, which nobody ever wins anyway? To answer that question, we need to go back a few years further to the year 2003. Now, we're in Michigan, a tiny blink-and-you'll-miss-it town called Everett, with a population of just 1,900 people. Jerry and Marge Selby were high school sweethearts before deciding to get married and settle down. They built an idyllic, happy family, raising 6 children, while running a local convenience store on Main Street. In their store, Jerry had manned the cigarette and liquor counter, while Marge made sandwiches and kept their books in order. They loved every day of running their little shop and raising their family. But now they were in their early 60s and they'd figured they'd been running their store long enough. So they sold it. They were going to retire without a plan, put their feet up for a bit, and decide what to do next. They still didn't have a plan for their next adventure when Jerry walked into his old convenience store again. He was just a customer these days, but he was able to spot something new. On the counter was a brochure for a new lottery game called Windfall. Luckily, Jerry decided to pick it up and read the rules of the new lottery game. Jerry was the best person to read through those rules. Sure, he'd run a convenience store for years and years, but that was far from his only thing he'd done with his life. He was actually seriously smart and had always had a brain for math. He was so good at it that he had gone to get a bachelor's degree in mathematics from West Michigan University after high school. So, while most of us would have a tough time even understanding the basic rules written in the lottery brochure, Jerry not only understood perfectly, but he also spotted something interesting. In just 3 minutes, he spotted a loophole that he knew he could benefit from. Jerry waited. Then, one day, he went out and spent a whopping $3,600 on Windfall lottery tickets. It sounded like an insane thing to do, but he came home with $6,300. How did Jerry know that would happen? Well, you know about lottery rollovers. That's when nobody wins the jackpot, so it rolls over and forms part of the jackpot for the next draw, right? That's how those Powerball jackpots get so big. Well, the Michigan Windfall game didn't work like that. Instead, when the jackpot reached $5 million, but nobody won it, instead of rolling over, it rolled down. What that means, the jackpot is split between the winners of lower tier prizes. So, for example, if you picked only 5 out of 6 numbers right, normally you'd win about $2,000. But when the jackpot is rolled down, picking 5 numbers right can earn you tens of thousands of dollars. In fact, for one of the draws, picking 5 numbers once carried a prize of $100,000 during a roll down. But that still doesn't explain why Jerry was so sure he wasn't blowing all his cash. Luckily, he was kind enough to let the media know how he did the math. He said he worked out that playing $1,100 guaranteed him one 4-number matching ticket, which earned him $1,000. That nearly made back all the cash he'd spent. Then, he divided the $1,100 by 57 and that told him he'd have 18 or 19 three-number matching tickets, which won him $50 each. 18 of those three-number winners meant $900. So, if he invested $1,100, he knew, mathematically, he'd get a $1,900 return. This all means that buying a certain number of tickets during a roll-down week means you're pretty much guaranteed to make a profit by winning lots of small prizes. Spend 500 grand on tickets, and you're gonna make a lot of money. But you also don't need as many as that. As Jerry was proving, sure, it sounds complicated to us, but to Jerry, it was just basic arithmetic. 3 months later, another roll-down happened. This time, he invested $8,000 into the lottery tickets, and he almost doubled it. By now, he kinda had to tell Marge what he was doing, but she said she wasn't surprised at all. She knew he was smart. But weirdly, Jerry figured millions of people would have figured that out by now. They hadn't. He was literally the only person on Earth who'd worked out how to beat the lottery. But he wouldn't be the only one for much longer. Jerry decided to set up a company called GS Investment Strategies, and he and Marge started playing hundreds of thousands every time there was a windfall roll down. But they weren't just playing, they were also recording all their winnings carefully to prove they were making huge profits off the game. And they were seeing huge success. One time, they spent $515,000 and won $853,000, almost a 60% return. It's pretty impressive. And while that time was an unusually big win, there's no doubt they were making a ton of cash. When their record books were stacked high and the tickets were all stored in huge bags, Jerry met up with some friends. Because he'd opened a company, he was able to sell shares in it to his family and friends. One share went for $500 apiece, but many were buying more than one. At first, it was just a way for Jerry and Marge to help those close to them to share in their good fortune. But then, they started going down to Sugar Ray's Cafe, the local hangout. There, they were meeting local investors who were also looking to get a piece of the action. Soon, the company of lottery players had expanded to include a local attorney, 2 retired farmer brothers, and the owner of a local tool shop. They were pretty big spenders. Just one of the brothers gave Jerry $8,000 to invest, and the other another $6,000 to invest for his grandkids. The owner of the tool shop made enough to pay for his 3 kids' schooling, plus law school for one of them, just from the earnings he made playing the lottery. By 2005, there were 25 members in Jerry's club, which split the profits in proportion to how much each member had invested. It was now much bigger than just friends and wealthy local investors. A factory plant manager, the vice president of a bank, and 3 state troopers were all in on it too. But a lot of people around town thought the whole group was insane to spend that kind of money on lottery tickets, and maybe they were right. Just as the group was riding high, having won millions after playing just 12 roll-downs, disaster struck. The Michigan windfall game was canceled by the state lottery. It turned out they just weren't selling enough tickets. Nobody wanted to play a game that never paid out a jackpot. They had no idea what they were missing. That was kind of the first time Jerry realized he was the only one who spotted the loophole in the rules. So, was it over for the elite group of lottery winners? Not exactly. Not long after the Michigan windfall game was canceled, one of the members of the group called Jerry. He had some interesting news. He'd been in Massachusetts and had spotted another lottery game called Cash Windfall. He asked Jerry if they could play that one instead. So, Jerry sat down at his computer and read the rules of the new game. Within 10 minutes, he'd crunched the numbers in his head and hand-worked out that it was another winner. It wasn't exactly the same, and the jackpots that were rolled down only reached 2 or 2.5 million, but it was still definitely worth playing. There were big profits to be made, so the company got back together, and Jerry and Marge worked out a plan. They would drive for 14 hours, covering 900 miles from Michigan to Massachusetts every time there was a roll down, and buy hundreds of thousands of cash windfall lottery tickets for the members of GS Investments Limited from 2 small local stores. And we're back to where the story started. Marge would stop by at Billy's Beer and Wine, while Jerry went, weird as it sounds, to a coffee shop called Jerry's Place. Then, they would take their tickets to a hotel. But this wasn't the sleek suite you'd picture when imagining gamblers making millions of dollars by spotting a loophole in a game. Instead, they'd book a little room at an average Red Roof Inn and start sorting tickets. They'd both check every ticket by hand for an incredible 10 hours a day for 10 straight days. You'd never guess winning the lottery could be such hard work, but it was paying off. On average, they were winning over $600,000 every roll down, which happens 7 times per year. Don't worry, we'll do the math for you. That means they were taking home a breathtaking $4.2 million every year, and they'd keep it up for a whopping 6 years. Even with all that success, it wasn't smooth sailing. Things began to change thanks to an incredible chance. Yuran Liu was an undergrad at MIT around the time, studying computer sciences, electrical engineering, and, unsurprisingly, math. He was also pretty famous around campus for coming in second place in a Robot Wars-style engineering contest with his little robot named Kamikaze Puppy. He was also a master of high-tech pranks. One even collecting more than 600 student passwords from the university computer system and sending them to the MIT admin just to prove how easy it was to hack their system. In other words, he was seriously smart, even among other smart people. As part of his undergrad study project, he was taking a closer look at lotteries, and he spotted something interesting.
I found a flaw in the lottery.
You guessed it. He noticed the same loophole Jerry did, even though he was young enough to be Jerry's grandchild. This kid realized there was a huge profit to be made, and he decided to do exactly what Jerry did. He opened a syndicate called Random Strategies Investments and got all his friends in on the game. But now, the media had caught on. The Boston Globe had heard whispers of these unlikely lottery syndicates and did some investigating. It wasn't long before they had enough material to run their story. And sure enough, this raised suspicions that they'd rigged the game. Ordinary people just couldn't believe you could win the lottery that way. In their eyes, it had to be some kind of organized crime or even high-level corruption at play. And lottery officials were also starting to get suspicious. They were watching the convenience stores where all the tickets were sold pretty closely and started spotting issues. On one occasion, they saw Marge apparently operating the lottery ticket machine on her own, which goes against lottery rules. One by one, they found a reason to remove the lottery license from 7 stores in total, including Jerry's Place and Billy's Beer and Wine. None of these stores wanted this to happen. In fact, they were earning a commission from these sales equal to 5% of all the money spent on lottery tickets. That sure adds up when you have someone like Jerry spending millions in your store. The store owners were totally on the side of the gamblers, and they didn't want the lottery shutting them down. Ow! Luckily for them, the suspension of the lottery licenses were only temporary, but that wouldn't help if Jerry's group was stopped. Jerry and Marge were prepared though. They knew right from the start that there was a possibility of a federal audit, and they'd made sure to plan for it. How? Well, by keeping every single ticket they ever bought. At first, they had them all stored in huge plastic tote bags on the top floor in the barn. But one day, Jerry had a look and decided that there were so many that the floor was going to fall through. So they moved them down to the pole barn and stored them all there. Soon, there were 60 to 65 giant totes filled with tickets. By the time they stopped gambling, they had a whopping $18 million worth of losing lottery tickets stashed away in their barn. But luckily, they didn't need them. See, no matter how much the lottery wanted them to be committing a crime, there just wasn't one. On roll-down weeks, the Massachusetts State Lottery was sometimes paying out more money than they made, but it was totally legit. In fact, it was their fault for creating that loophole in the first place. Both Jerry's group and the MIT students were simply playing by the rules and winning. Soon, there was a third syndicate on the scene too. And the MIT gang were proof of just how much these groups were winning. Over 7 years playing the lottery, only on roll-down days, they spent about $18 million on tickets, but earned $3.5 million in profits. Sure, the officials were dumbfounded. They'd been looking for a crime, but all they found were some smart people using math to win the lottery. There was nothing anyone can do to stop them, because nobody's odds of winning were affected by these groups buying so many tickets on roll-down weeks. Despite that, they were still earning a profit. In the end, they told the media that they weren't sorry for creating a lottery with that kind of loophole. In fact, they kind of went the other way, saying that their customers wanted a lottery that had better odds of winning. so they gave it to him. Sure, we'll let them pretend the loophole wasn't a mistake. So, what happened? Well, it wasn't too long before the Massachusetts State Lottery decided to change to a different game, one that didn't have an easily exploited loophole in it for the smart people to capitalize off. That was the simple end to Jerry and Marge's amazing tale. But nobody minded. The amount of cash they'd made by that time was breathtaking. In total, before you calculate all those peaky taxes, Jerry's group had won an astounding $26 million. After taxes, the group had reached over $8 million in profits. I'm sure I'm not the only one who'd love a bonus like that, but despite their gambling ability, the tiny town of Everett isn't anything like Vegas. None of the members of the group were going to spend their millions on shiny mansions or flashy cars. So where did Jerry and Marge's fortune go? Well, let's not forget they had 6 children. They also had an incredible 14 grandkids and another 10 great-grandchildren. That's a lot of children who all needed stuff. Most importantly, in education. Jerry's lottery success was more than enough to prove how valuable university can be in the right hands. So that's where most of the cash went, which was true for most members of the group. What do they do these days? Amazingly, even though they're not playing the lottery anymore, they still meet up and they're still gambling. But now, it's less like millions of dollars worth of lottery tickets and more like a few dimes exchanged in a poker match over Marge's chicken pot pie. Still sounds pretty good though. And you never know, with Jerry at the table, it may not be long before he spots another loophole somewhere else. Jerry and Marge's years spent winning the lottery has got to be one of the best ways ever to win the lottery. Don't believe me? Think it would be better to win a giant Powerball ticket than spend 8 years slowly winning millions? Well, watch this video if you want to find out why you should be careful what you wish for.